Hello, hi, and welcome to another episode of The Emma Gunn Show. I am so delighted to be spending this time with you. Thank you for choosing to spend this time with me, whether you are watching on YouTube or whether you are listening on your favoured audio podcast platform. I'm just glad that you're here. It's a rather frustrating day, I have to be honest. I'm recording this a lot later than I would have liked, but I'm waiting in for deliveries, which is, if you work from home, it is one of the things that gets in the way of a lot. Last week, I had to cancel 2 appointments in London in order to wait in for couriers because I wasn't able to then, once I knew the delivery was coming, I couldn't rearrange the delivery for a time that was convenient. So I had to then let 2 people down, which is very annoying. But today I find myself in the same position, and something was supposed to be delivered by 2. It is now well after 2. Nothing has arrived. So I'm recording this in the hope that they were, well, sort of in the hope that by doing this I'll get interrupted and the parcel will finally arrive. But also I'm glad because I was very close. I worked out earlier this morning and I was like, oh God, if I get in the shower now and wash my hair, it's going to be, the deliveries between 12 and 2. I might not hear the doorbell. So I thought I'm just going to chance it. And thank goodness I did. Otherwise I'd be sitting here in front of you now, festering, rotting in some rancid, heavily sweated in gym gear, which I think we can all agree none of us want. Anyway, and if you do, please don't say it. So I wanted to talk to you about a couple of things in this episode. And the first one, well, there are 2 things. The first one, I couldn't really decide which one I wanted to start with. Okay, so let me start with this one. And it's about your opinion on whether you ever leave a bad review or let it be known when you are unhappy with service. And this came up sort of on the back of what I talked to you about last week in bullet points and how I shared what I eat in the day. And despite having been really transparent about the fact that I was filming on a day that represented a good day for me as somebody who's in recovery from binge eating disorder and therefore wasn't struggling with binging or wanting to eat, even though I was transparent about that, it seemed to upset a lot of people. I've actually just been having a really interesting conversation with a brilliant listener. She's been here since the beginning, Yaz, and we were talking about it. And she was saying I was really interested by the feedback that you received. I'm having a lot of thoughts and feelings. So we've just been sort of chatting about it. And so had I. And I had been thinking about the fact that I'm sort of boiling it down, but sometimes it sort of almost became apparent that the people who are most upset weren't people who were already against me, if you like. They're not the people who would take a look at my content, hear my voice, look at my face and go, don't like that, and therefore picket it. It's not those sorts of people. It seemed to be that the people that were most upset by the video that I posted about my what I eat in a day are the people who had previously been my champions, who felt like I had somehow let them down by illustrating a day when I wasn't struggling. And as I said on bullet points, there's something that makes you accountable about filming what you're doing. So you're not going to go to the fridge and eat a spoonful of Philadelphia out of the tub because I would know that I would have to film that. I didn't have any Philadelphia in that day and I didn't have any want to do that. But had I think it would have been a far more difficult process. And so all of the feedback that I got generally that was quite bad were people who were upset with me and disappointed because they thought I was an ally. And in posting what I posted, they obviously felt let down. And I've talked about it before, but it's almost a little bit like the Khloe Kardashian effect. When Khloe Kardashian was the sort of odd one out Kardashian, she had a different body shape, she looked a different way. People were like, oh, we can get on board with her because it was easier to get on board with Khloe over Kim and Kourtney. But actually, then when she made lots of lifestyle changes, whether they were good or bad, I personally think revenge body is unhelpful. But I mean, obviously she went through her own process. A lot of people felt left behind and it made them really cross and it made them sort of almost anti-Khloe. So I'm not saying I'm Khloe Kardashian, obviously, but it was just being the first time I'd ever shared anything like that, it was interesting to see who was cross. Anyway, it got me thinking about feedback. It got me thinking about, when do you say, I'm unhappy with this? And it made me think about something that happened recently. So I went for a Sunday roast and it was really bad. And I think we can probably have a whole conversation, many of us, about the fact that no Sunday roast is really good unless it's homemade. But making a roast at home is a real faff and is hugely labour intensive, and sometimes, depending on how many people you're cooking for, can lead to some waste, because let's face it, you do enough potatoes for the people that you've got, and then you do a couple more. You do enough parsnips for the amount of people you're feeding, and then you do a few more. It's one of those sorts of kinds of meal preps. And anyway, I went to a local pub and went for a roast, and it was terrible. I mean, it was awful. Nothing about it was particularly redeemable, other than the service. Like, the service was really good, and when it was like, oh, I'm really sorry, but this meat is really overcooked, they were very gracious and helpful. So the service was really great, but the food, every single element of that roast was terrible. And I was having a conversation with the people I was dining with, and we were saying, and basically someone said, I think one of us needs to write a review and just say how bad it was. And my viewpoint is, you're going to write your review with whether or not you go back. And obviously I'm never going to go back to that place for a roast. And we sort of had a debate back and forth about whether you do and you don't. And then we started reading Google reviews of the place, and quite a few of them were bad. And again, some of them were quite amusing in how bad they were, or quite amusing in how they took down the place for being bad. But it was one of those things of, will it really make any difference? Do you think the management look at those reviews and think, we really need to up our game? Or do you think they think, this is our standard, like it, great, don't come back? And I think that there's been a massive change in customer service and delivery of service, and the way consumers interact with shops and goods and retailers and vice versa over the last 20 or so years. My personal belief is that you spend your money with your feet. I don't know if that's the right expression, but for example, as you know, recently I signed up to Pilates and went for a first session. I was like, okay, I can get on board with this. Very local, very small studio. And then I bought a monthly pass, and I just didn't feel like I was getting my money's worth at all. And I think the teacher as well could sort of feel that I was unhappy, and obviously, and I think there was like a teensy bit of friction, but not unhappy, but just kind of like, I've done 35 of these, but just someone who's basically not paying attention at all. And so a friend of mine said, well, you should tell the owner. Surely they would want to know, because surely they would want to keep your business. And again, I said, I don't think that my feedback is going to meet a positive, open response. I don't think it will be a helpful conversation. I think it will probably feel like an attack. I don't want to attack this person, but I'm sure that when I don't buy another monthly pass, they're going to either think, don't care, didn't like her anyway, or they're going to think, ooh, yeah, I could feel that wasn't going well. Wonder how we could do things differently. Or maybe not. But I'm curious, as I've said it before, I say it on every episode now, I'm so curious to know what you think. You're an intelligent bunch. I know that you're really wise and you're very thoughtful, which is why I really love getting your emails. So please don't be shy, office@emmaguns.com. But I really appreciate your feedback to the episodes. And I think you would probably have a really interesting take on all of this. And to that point, I had a really wonderful email actually this week about coaching. Because obviously a couple of weeks ago, I talked about the cult of coaching and how I thought it was quite nefarious. And I referenced my friend Hannah Betts, who's writing a big piece for one of the broadsheets. And I had a really brilliant email from a coach called Jeremy Bentham, a really thoughtful email. And the reason why I loved it so much is because what he said was not, I'm a coach, you don't know what you're talking about, and actually you don't have enough experience to actually speak on this, which often happens in the online space. People will say, you've got no business talking about this. But actually, he said, look, I'm just going to share my perspective with you as someone who's trained as a coach, agrees with a lot of your points, but also think that there might be other parts of the industry as a whole that might not be visible to you that I would love to share. And I really appreciated that very gentle, very kind kind of, I understand where you're coming from, but here's my point of view. And it doesn't matter that we don't agree. I absolutely loved that, because it feels very black and white sometimes, the discourse online, and there's no room for grey or nuance. And it was really nice to have an exchange with somebody, a highly trained coach, by the way, to say, yes, there are problems with the coaching industry, absolutely. But when it's good, it's really good. And this is how it differs from therapy. And this is why things should, this is why the approach is different for various things. It was I need to go back and reread it actually, because it was one of those things. I picked it up on my phone. I don't know about you, but I tend to skim read on my phone, and I need to get a bit better at not skim reading on my phone and just marking as unread and reading it when I've got time to sit at the computer and read. I'm very old school like that. I'm a dinosaur like that. If I've got to read something, if it's important, it needs to be on the big screen. Anyway, beside the point. But feedback, I think it depends on how you give it, obviously. But is there any way to leave a Google review, for example, on this particular Sunday roast and say, look, the service is really excellent, but I wouldn't waste your money. These are London prices, and the food is not up to muster. And by all accounts, I've been to a Toby Carvery once. If you're in the UK, you'll know. But apparently, if you do want a proper Sunday roast, you have to go to Toby Carvery. But I don't know, not been recently. I went once about 15 years ago. Maybe I'll go again soon and I can feed back. But I just don't know as if there's any value other than... I don't know. When I look at Google reviews, I always think that the bad ones are usually quite bitter and are usually for a really stupid reason. It's like, oh, I can't believe they charged us £18 for a steak or something. And it's like, well, when you're talking about the price, that's something completely different than service, quality of food, all that sort of thing. Because you can find out prices before you go. So I don't know. I just think I think the feedback space is a very, very strange thing now. And I also know, having been in this sort of retail world or sort of retail adjacent, that the customer is always right thing doesn't hold true anymore. And actually, if you complain, you're more likely to be seen as the problem than as being seen to have useful feedback. I don't know. That was just something that I observed and I'm observing. And I just don't know what the right thing to do is. Do you actually say, listen, I'm not saying this to be mean. I'm not saying this to be unkind, but you just need to know why I'm not coming back. Or does anyone really care? Does anyone really care? Really? I don't think so, personally. But maybe I'm being a little bit too passive. Maybe I'm being avoidant, which is something I'm quite good at doing. Maybe I'm actually just sort of scurrying away and not actually saying, do you know what? I did pay for this, and I felt like I felt as though I got a sub-quality service and experience, and that's really disappointing. Because, as I said about this particular Pilates studio, someone said leave a Google review, and I was like, they haven't got that many. And the bad ones it's almost like 10 good reviews are the value of one bad one. So you don't want somebody's business to suffer because you didn't enjoy the experience. Because, as I keep saying to people, I think one of the things that happens online, or just in life actually, is that we can sometimes assume that people have exactly the same life experience as us, or have had the same, or know what we do. So when we come up against somebody who doesn't know something that we know, instead of thinking, oh, I should tell them, or, oh, they don't know that, it's almost as if that person must be an idiot because they don't know what I know. And that sort of seems to be how the online dialogue goes these days. Like, you're an idiot because you don't know this. Oh, use your brain, do your research. And it's so sad. It's so, so sad. So that's something that I've been thinking about recently, and I want your feedback on that. So please let me know, office@emmaguns.com. If you're watching this on YouTube, where it's really easy to actually interact with the video, please leave a comment and people can reply to your comments. I can reply. Podcast is obviously slightly harder. I know they do it on Spotify. I didn't even know that until Yaz told me the other day. But if you want to actually speak to me directly, then office@emmaguns.com. Comment underneath the video. I will see those as well. But also Substack, where when I post this podcast, I will be posting on Substack as well, just to let people know that it's live. So it's also a space where you can go in and comment and add your tuppence worth to the conversation. And I would really love to hear from you. So before I get on to my next topic, I just thought we could have a wee bit of a breather. I just want to give you a little bit of an insight into some posts that I've had this week. So usually my post is fashion or beauty or health related. And first of all, I'm actually wearing one of the pieces. This is an Albaray jumper. So if you're watching me on YouTube, I'm now standing up. It is the coziest chocolate brown knit you have ever worn. I might actually get it in the mole colour because it's so nice. And the reason why I'm mentioning it is because if you're watching this or if you're listening to this when the show is going live, there's actually a 25% off Black Friday promotion. The jumper's £69, so 25% off is quite a helpful amount and sort of takes it down a notch. that's sort of, I don't know, a bit easier to handle. So that's something that I filmed a styling not wearing video about. So it's actually it's quite oversized, but it's really beautifully cut. So it's very flattering across the shoulders. It's quite long. And it's the kind of thing, because I'm an hourglass shape, I would wear with skinny jeans, but for some reason it seems to work really well with wide legs. So I did a bit of a video sort of trying to figure out like what the best outfit, what the best jeans were for it to go with. So if you haven't watched that, go over to Emma Guns on Instagram and take a look. The other thing that arrived this morning, and I think this is a brand actually that it can be quite easy to forget about. And I say that reluctantly, but the reason I say it is because I think it's so embedded as being heritage, great quality, reliable products that they're almost like, I don't know, they get lost behind all of those brands that sort of give you a lot of sparkle, razzle dazzle, make a lot of claims, do the whole innovation thing and get your attention because they're sort of new and different and exciting. And it's not that this brand isn't exciting. I think it's just that it's consistent and it delivers and it's safe. And sometimes in life, we don't talk about the people in our lives who are safe and reliable. We talk about the ones who are exciting and make us, I don't know, just sort of distract us or cause us to feel things that we don't want to feel. And so basically, I'm sort of equating Elizabeth Arden to a very good, reliable friend who's always there for you, because I do believe that's what they are. So I've got some ASMR for you. It's not ASMR, I know. But the ceramide capsules, which are absolutely amazing. And again, reliable because they give you perfect dose, which is generous. So you can use it from your forehead all the way down to your chest. Perfect dose of ceramide. So the things that really help the skin barrier, very nourishing, keep the right things in, stop the things getting out that you don't want to get out. Really support skin health. I'm also holding up the Retinol plus HPR Ceramide Rapid Skin Renewing Water Cream, which is brilliant if you want to start a retinol journey and want to take it low and slow. Well, actually, you don't take it slow because you can use this daily, but it's delivered in such a way that you're far less likely to experience the turbulence or the sort of the sort of irritation that can go hand in hand with other retinols. It's a really beautiful formula. And the whole idea is, how can we make this really easy for people to get into retinol? And that's their version. And then, of course, you've got 8-hour cream. No home should be without one. Whether you've got chapped lips, whether you've got a graze, a boo-boo, I don't know, a dry skin, a dry heel, a cuticle that needs a bit of work. It's absolutely one of those brands. So that actually arrived just before I started recording. Also with some of their Prevage City Smart. Again, very high quality, very high price point, but really incredible SPF full spectrum 50, SPF 50 PA++++ kind of thing. So basically what I'm trying to say is, I sometimes forget to talk about Elizabeth Arden as much as I should, because I just assume that everybody is already in love with it. But sometimes it's those brands that you have to remind people about. Now, speaking of new, dazzling and exciting, I received a lovely parcel this week from Celeste Barber. Now, I'm sure it was Celeste Barber's people, but even so, I'm just going to pretend that it was from Celeste herself, and she selected these products for me personally because she has brought out a beauty range called Booie, Booie, and she sent me a lip, cheek and eye stick, a lipstick trio. I'm wearing one of them now, the pink one, a rose one, and also a mascara. Again, I've done a reel for Instagram where I've put on a very light layer of foundation, and I've just used those products, and they are lovely. If you've been watching me recently and you've seen me rave about the Katie Jane Hughes soft smudge lip and cheek sticks, I love those products because they're blurring, a bit like Reasons Bronzing Balm, unbelievably blurring, just beautiful, kind of enhance, but also make the skin look slightly unreal. This is almost not the polar opposite, but just a different format, because where KJH brand is very blurring and sort of beautifying in a sort of almost like filtered, soft filter finish kind of way, these are very sheeny, very satiny, almost quite shiny, and so they're enhancing in a completely different way. They kind of do for your skin what a long walk out on a cold day would do. That's what the lip and cheek and eye balm, not balm, what is it called? It's called Bam 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 Lip, Cheek and Eye Tint. That's what it felt like it did. It kind of put that sort of freshness, that life, that sort of blood circulation into my cheeks, into my face that I would expect from a long walk in the cold. The lip colours are unbelievably moisturising, make your lips feel almost like pillowy, but they deliver a very sheer pigment of colour. And the mascara is just a very safe, gives you black, long, thicker lashes. It's a really nice brand. I've only used it a few times. I filmed one of the times that I used it. But if you are into that kind of thing at all, I heartily recommend that you go and check that out. And then finally, for the makeup element, I received a parcel from Me Cosmetics. Now, I talked about the irritating part of working from home sometimes is deliveries. So I haven't left the house today and I'm feeling quite stir crazy, but we will survive. And what happened with Me Cosmetics, so I don't have an external letterbox. I live in an apartment building, so you have to get in to leave notes saying that you tried to deliver. And if you're not in, obviously you can't do that. So it's not the greatest. So actually this had been sitting in a shop across the road for weeks, and I didn't know it was there until the UPS guy, Mark, said, you know that I delivered something for you last week, did you pick it up? And I was like, oh no. Anyway, Me Cosmetics, so I've talked about them a lot and I've used them a lot on my Instagram. They are a brand that specialise in this scalp foundation. So brilliant if you have any kind of hair loss or hair thinning and you want to give the appearance of fuller hair, because it is essentially makeup for your scalp. You use a brush, it's like a waxy, powdery formula. It doesn't really transfer, although it's not perfect, so there will be some, but I use it. And if you look on YouTube and you can see I've used a little bit today, I just get the brush and I just stipple it into my hairline there where I've got the most thinning. It's much better than it was because of the treatment I've had with Philip Kingsley, but just a little bit of support there. And especially when I'm on camera and I've got lights on and the light would find my scalp and bounce off my skin, it just makes it look thicker, mattifies it down so the light doesn't bounce off, and it just means that my hair looks thicker on my hairline, which is where it can look weakest. So these are absolutely brilliant. They've sent me a variety of colours from auburn, dark blonde, mid brown and dark brown, I think, and a few other bits and bobs. I haven't actually had time to sit down and open them all and have a look, but I'll probably do that on Instagram. So again, Emma Guns on Instagram if you want to check that out. But those are my little beauty recommendations for this week. I will put all of the links in the show notes and also in the caption in the show notes on YouTube. So that's where you will be able to find them. Oh dear, there was some stress here then. I thought I hadn't actually done the proper recording of my voice on the last section, but here we are in section 3 of this podcast, and I have a question that I want to ask you, and my delivery still hasn't been, so I bet you this is the time when the doorbell goes, but there we go. Makes it more tense. So I want to ask your opinion about this. Should your friends' enemies become your enemies? Pause for effect. I have thought about this a lot recently because I think we can all agree that if one has an issue with another person, it feels really wonderful if your friends also take up your cause and feel so affronted and offended and upset by that person and what they did to you that they would no longer speak to them, if that's the route that you've chosen. And yet, I think we can also all agree that it can feel very unfair to do that. And as much as you might dislike the way that somebody has treated a friend of yours, it probably is appropriate to judge them as you find them, whilst also bearing in mind, if they have, for example, screwed your friend over, that they probably aren't to be trusted. But I've been going back and forth about this recently, and I feel like someone who's had to do a lot of evolving in my life, because I am very emotionally reactive by nature. And as I'm getting older, I think I'm getting much better at taking a beat, thinking it through, not just thinking it through, but thinking about the long-term impact of one's behaviour. And I think I only used to think about how it would feel in the moment and think, yeah, that feels good right now, let's go with that. And then a little while later realise that you'd sort of, screwed yourself over by behaving rashly or emotionally or a knee-jerk reaction had sort of set you off on a path where you ended up having to fall on your own sword, or you were hoisted by your own petard, if that's the expression. Anyway, what's the right thing to do? What is the right thing to do? Because I was thinking about this recently, because something has happened in my sphere, and I'm really unhappy with the way that somebody has treated someone that I care about very deeply. But that's kind of none of my business, the actual act of the unfairness. And I won't be convinced otherwise about whether something was fair or not. Like, I think I've got the gist of the situation. And I can try to be there for my friends, and I will be there for my friends, and I'll try and say all the right things and be good counsel. But I also have to have some sort of interaction and dealing with the other party. Now, in the past, I would have just, no, you hurt my friend, you hurt me. But I just don't know whether that's a great long-term solution. And I think, again, you just end up hurting yourself. So do you let your feelings be known? Do you say, look, I know the situation. Here's the thing. You and I are okay, but I'd be lying if from where I'm looking at it, it didn't look shady. And I think as well, one can only really do that when one has heard both sides. I think there's nothing worse than somebody being cross with you about something that they talk about, that they've talked about with someone else, and they haven't heard your side. I think that feels very unjust and very, very unfair. And I also think that no one that I'm sort of really close to, and certainly not in this situation, there's been no sort of smear campaign. There's just been this is what happened. It's not ideal. It didn't feel very good, but we move on. And that's really mature and grown up, and that's absolutely appropriate. But it's like, but where is the space for the fury? Where is the space for the anger? Because you're entitled. And again, didn't happen to me, but because it happened to someone who I care about really deeply, it's just been crossing my mind. Like, is it going to come up? And if it does, what do I say? And should I bring it up? Like, should I say, look, I know that this happened. I'm just going to register my displeasure. I would like to hear your side. Does it matter? What does it matter? I'm not the jury. So is it even appropriate for me to ask to hear the other side? I don't know. I think this is a real minefield. And I know that definitely in my younger days, if friends of mine fell out with somebody, and actually this came up about 2 years ago. I met up with a friend who was sort of in a bit of a group, and there was one friend who'd fallen out with another, and I had sort of felt like it would be appropriate to unfollow that first person on Facebook. And let's face it, any kind of when they fell out, I thought I was friends with my friend, and as a sort of act of solidarity, the doorbell's going. Oh, so it wasn't the doorbell, it was a phone call. My phone was not on silent for the first time in about 100 years. Anyway, do you take up for your friend and make their enemies your enemies, or do you remain Switzerland? And I can think about an example of this when a really good friend of mine had two best friends and they fell out. And she said right from the off, I am not taking sides. I am going to be Switzerland. And she managed to hold that position for quite some time, maybe a couple of years. And then eventually, not because of pressure from any side, but after a certain amount of time, it just became that one friendship faltered and the other didn't. And I thought it was a really good example. I mean, obviously it took a huge amount of time, but it's sort of like everything rights itself in the end. Like, things turn out the way they're supposed to turn out. And so I am slightly confused about what the right thing is to do in these situations, because I think sometimes when you do take up for a friend, even though it's you trying to show that you're a great person to them, you can say, look, I love you, I support you, you have my support, and I believe that what you're telling me is true. You can almost seem like you're being aggressive or bullying or being unkind to somebody else. And to finish off that story about the friend that I unfriended on Facebook, they were not a great friend by any means, but they were close to somebody I was really good friends with. And when they fell out, I felt like the right thing to do was to unfriend them on Facebook, again, to show solidarity. And then many years later, I met up with a mutual friend, not the friend that I unfriended on Facebook, and just asked very very benignly like, oh, how is so-and-so doing? Because I had no beef with that person. I had no issue. I didn't believe one side of a story versus another. Do you know what I mean? It was just kind of that, it was an unfriending in order to sort of do the right thing by somebody else. And all those years later, that person was still unhappy about that and had found that to be very aggressive and to be almost like kicking them when they were down. And when I asked, it was very clear. When I said, oh, tell them I say hi, it was very clear, like, oh no, I'm not going to tell them I've seen you. And that was when I really, I suppose for the first time, realised quite how aggressive social media can be. Even acts of liking or not liking or viewing or not viewing, all of those things can be sort of these tiny microaggressions or these acts of aggression that build up. But I do think it's really interesting. How do you show up? Okay, so say you don't make your friends' enemies your enemies. How do you show up and support a friend who is going through a conflict with somebody where they have been wronged, where they are the party that has been hard done by? How do you show up and support if you have to engage with the third party, or you're the third party in this instance, but if you have to engage with the other person involved, how do you do so in a way that feels honourable and appropriate? I think it's really bizarre. And I've definitely been in disagreements with people. I've fallen out with people. And I didn't used to choose to do this, but I choose now. Keep your powder dry. Say absolutely nothing. Let the other person do a smear campaign. Let the other person tell people terrible, terrible things about you because they're not true. And actually, it's a great way for you to edit out people from your life who would think so poorly of you so easily. Because all of the people that I've lost, in inverted commas, appreciate that on YouTube for seeing their finger apostrophes, of all of the people that I have lost through somebody telling them something about me based on our relationship, they've never asked me what my version of events were. And equally, I've had some of those probing friends who are like, I've never asked you what happened with such and such. And I've always replied, and I never will. That'll never tell you. It's done. It's ancient history. I know that there's a story out there. Believe what you want to believe. The only people who really matter in that exchange are the two of us. We both know really what went on. I know the bits where I was right. I also know the bits where I was wrong. I'm sure that person does too. That's done. It's over. Sign it off. Let's not give it any life by talking to each other about it or to talking to third parties. So I'm just really curious because I think this is something that I've definitely come up against, and I have behaved what I thought was honourably, and I realise in hindsight was inappropriately or unhelpful. I am sure I will encounter this again. I think over the course of my life, I have got better at dealing with this, whether it's being involved in the dynamic that has sort of blown up or being adjacent to the dynamic that has blown up. But I want to get even better. And I don't know what necessarily that looks like. And as you are such a wise bunch, as you are such a wise bunch, I would really appreciate your thoughts, whether it's you DM me on Instagram where I'm at Emma Guns, or you comment below this YouTube video, whether you DM me, I've already said that, whether you comment on Spotify, although I, as I said, didn't really know that was a thing, or you email me at office@emmaguns.com. I would be really curious because I think there is a way. I think there is a way to do it. And if somebody shares with me the golden rule, I will share it on this podcast and I will credit you, because I think we need more people in the world who know what the golden rule is so that we can navigate life, the world, all of those things with far greater ease and with a lot more sort of emotional dexterity, so that we're good to everybody, but also authentic and true to ourselves. Especially in the situation I'm referencing is a situation where somebody has been treated in a way that I think I can't see any argument for why what would have happened. It's not happened to me. My displeasure at it happening is irrelevant, but moving forward in a relationship with somebody who's involved in that, who did something which I think is not great, how do I move forward adequately and appropriately with that person? Because they haven't done anything to me. So golden rules, your insight, your input. Comment below this video, comment on Spotify, DM me on Instagram where I'm at Emma Guns. Email me at office@emmaguns. And if you're wondering, if you haven't listened for a few weeks and you're wondering why I'm not mentioning the Facebook group, it's because the Facebook group was so dry and it wasn't getting any interaction, and I'd post things and it would be seen by 5 people. And look, as much as I work in a creative job that's online, when you are committing time to a platform and it's giving absolutely nothing back and it's not reaching the thousands of people who have taken the time to join the group, it is absolutely pointless to keep throwing things at it, because basically what they want is for you to put money behind posts, and it's a fool's errand to do that. It's a wild goose chase for the likes and the interaction. You need a controversial group. You need to be publishing controversial opinions and starting arguments for Facebook groups to work, to be truth be told. And I don't think that's what we do here. I don't think that's what the Emma Gunn Show has ever been about. It's never been about having arguments with each other. It's been about sharing good information and potentially helping each other. And algorithms don't necessarily love that. So Facebook group is kind of on the, I check in once a week, nothing's happening. But there is so much more activity in all of those other places that I've mentioned, but also the one that I didn't mention just now is my Substack. So when I publish this podcast, I will be posting it on my Substack as well. So if you haven't got time to engage in the video or in the podcast, there'll be like an overview written for you, which you can read on your mobile phone, read whenever it is that's convenient. And then if you think, actually, I'm going to listen to that episode, or I'm going to go to that episode and add it to my queue, you can, and it will be there. But Substack, the comments under Substack have been really good. Like there's been some really brilliant OG Emma Gunn Show listeners who've been going in, like Yaz, who've been starting great discussions. So please do go in there, wherever it is that you feel most comfortable. If you want other people to interact with your comments, I suspect that YouTube and Substack are the best. If you want to just chat to me, my email, office@emmaguns.com. If, again, slightly more personal but shorter messages on DM on Instagram would be absolutely amazing. But whatever the way is that you prefer. But 2 quite big questions there. How do you leave your feedback? How do you leave a review? How do you let people know that you're unhappy? And should your friends' enemies become your enemies? Plus a lovely little beauty sandwich there with some of my little deliveries from the week. So let me know your feedback. Please do get in touch. It's a joy always to hear from you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I will see you on the next one.